Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today we're going to be doing a sight guide for Battlefield 4. We're going over the 8 close range sights, the 6 medium range scopes, the 5 extremely long range scopes, the 3 pistol sights, the 2x magnifier, and the canted iron sights. The only sight I don't have on here is the 3x magnum scope, and that'll be in a future video. The first sight I have here is the reflex red dot sight. This is going to be one of the first sights you unlock in the game regardless of what weapon you're using. On assault rifles, on carbines, on your basic PDWs. It only takes about 10 kills to unlock, and it's a great replacement for iron sights, but we got some better red dot sights out there once you get more kills. Next, we have the Coyote red dot sight, which is without a doubt going to be one of the most popular sights in the game. It takes up so little of your screen viewing area that it makes it very easy to track your targets and not cover up an area of the screen where an enemy might be hiding. It's got one tiny little red dot in the center, which can get lost if the action gets a little crazy. And one of the drawbacks for this is that it's generally a battle pack unlock, so it could take you a while to get it. The Cobra sight is one of my favorite sights from BF3, and it's still maintaining well in Battlefield 4. In fact, it might be one of my preferred sights for this game. The 3-prong sight in the center allows me to track the action even through intense explosions or looking into the sunlight. Next up, we have the hollow sight, which in Battlefield 3 gave us a tiny bit of magnification over your average reflex sight. No longer is the case in Battlefield 4. It's simply just a one-time sight, which is accurate to the real one. Unfortunately, this sight takes up so much of your screen real estate that it can be a little bit tricky to track your targets. I would recommend only using it if you're trying to replicate the aesthetic feel of, say, modern military movies or something like that. The M4 with a hollow sight on there is a very recognizable image. Now, if you like that targeting reticle and you want to take up a little bit less of your screen with the sight body, then the HD33 is a great sight for you. It's not the most minimal sight in the world, but it's got a nice reticle and it's pretty low profile for what it does. And lastly, for the basic sights, we have the PKAS. You might prefer the way that this sight is designed just because it takes up a little bit less of the screen at the bottom and sort of shifts the body of the scope to the top of the sight, which might work better for your aiming style. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it, but it is an interesting alternative. And side by side, the Cobra on the left, Coyote in the center, and the HD33 on the right. You can see just how minimal that Coyote sight is, but you know what? I do like my Cobra 3-prong approach. Now, if you're thinking you might need a tiny bit more magnification, you can always throw on the 2x magnifier, which does take up a lot of your screen, but it is helpful in some of those long-range situations. And before we move on to the medium range scopes, we've got the IRNV, which is infrared night vision sight on the left, and then we've got the FLIR 2x sight, which stands for forward looking infrared. Both of these sights help to pop your targets out of dark environments. They also work during the daytime. Personally, I found the FLIR to be much more useful, easier to spot my targets, and just generally a cleaner image overall, but they are highly susceptible to flashbangs in bright areas, so they're not great for every level. Moving on to the medium range sights, we have 3 3.4x sights and then 3 4x sights. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because they all sort of do the exact same thing. They just have different targeting reticles and take up different amounts of the screen. This one here is the M145 3.4x sight. It's got black distance markers on there, and it's also got a red dot sight in the center, so having those two contrasting colors allows you to see things in both dark and light areas just fine. This one here is the Prisma 3.4x sight, takes up less of the screen than the M145, and again has the black and red alternating colors to make it good for light and dark. This one here is the PKA, and it's the most minimal of the 3.4x sights. It was my favorite 3.4x sight in Battlefield 3, and it's my favorite in BF4. I really like the targeting reticle. If you want to up your magnification ever so slightly, you can use a 4x sight. This is the ACOG. It's got an interesting little red triangle in the center. If you like that targeting system, this sight should work out well for you. Then we have the JG M4, which has got an elaborate distance marker system. It's also got a for show laser sight on the side there. It would be very cool if that laser sight actually functioned, but unfortunately it just takes up part of your screen. And last of the medium range scopes, we have the PSO1. This one is very large. It doesn't really offer any other advantages over the other 4x scopes. Here we have my 2 scopes of choice, the PKA on the left and the ACOG on the right. PK8 is a 3.4 times magnification, while the ACOG is a 4 times. This just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the magnification differences are. We're going to move into the long range scopes now, and the important thing to know about these is that when you equip them, you have scope glint. Now, scope glint works a little bit differently in Battlefield 4 than it did in Battlefield 3. Here we have Matimio in the distance with a long range scope, and he's going to slowly rotate until his scope glint is no longer visible to us. We are testing the angles at which scope glint was visible. The most important thing is that it's only visible when you're aiming down sights. I replicated this same test on my end and found that this is the degree at which Matimio could see my scope glint. So it seems to be about, I would say, 10 degrees off of the target before your target can no longer see your glint. The first of the long range scopes we're going to look at is the CL6X, which is a 6 times scope. It's going to be most commonly the starting scope for a lot of the sniper rifles available, and it's very useful but not incredibly high magnification. Next we have the kind of funky looking PKS 077 times magnification scope. This one is just slightly more magnification. The general targeting circle is pretty much on size with the other ones out there. I'm not crazy about the distance markers on this one. You might prefer it, but I have a feeling most people are going to prefer something else. Next we have the rifle scope, which is an 8 times scope. It's got easy to follow markers on there. It's pretty basic. It was one of my favorite scopes in Battlefield 3 and probably will be one of my favorite sniping scopes in BF4. The only problem is that it can take a while to unlock this scope for certain sniper rifles. Taking a pretty big leap in magnification, we have the Hunter 20 times magnification scope. This thing is great for hitting targets at extreme long ranges, and at this point in sniping, you're going to want to start zeroing in your targeting reticle. Now, if you want simply stupid levels of magnification, I mean, this thing could be used to look at craters on the moon. You can get the ballistic 40 times scope. This thing is just way too overpowered for anything practical, but if you want some crazy long distance headshots, this is the scope to use. Say you want some sight variety. I still have the 40 times ballistic scope on here, but I've attached the variable zoom scope, which offers me a 14 times magnification level. So by hitting the T button, you can see I zoomed out there. Then I can easily zoom back in to hit extreme long range targets. Having variety is great as a sniper. Alternatively, you could put the variable zoom on a 6 times scope, and then you can have that 14 times magnification or the 6 times magnification. Maybe you have a 40 times scope, but you see somebody in close quarters. That's where the canted iron sights come in handy. You can swap to this real quick, faster than switching to a sidearm, and try to deal with them. And speaking of sidearms, we now for the first time ever in Battlefield get custom sidearm sights. This is the Ghost Ring. It adds a ring system and a little bit of red to pop your sight out from the background. I find that it actually does help with aiming a bit. Perhaps you want to bring that red dot sight technology over to your sidearm. This is the mini RDS. You can put it on the pistol and get pretty darn accurate shots with this. The only problem is that sometimes the dot can be lost in an intense firefight. Lastly, we have the Delta red dot sight, and this is definitely a bigger red triangle. It's going to be easy to keep track of it no matter how intense the firefight gets. Personally, I kind of like the Ghost Ring overall. It sort of keeps that authentic feel and adds a little bit of tech into the mix as well. So that pretty much wraps it up for this sight guide. I hope it gives you an idea of what kind of sights you might want to start unlocking for which guns. This is not a sniping guide. There will be something like that in the near future, but for now it's just what the sights are, what they do, which ones you might want to go for. As always, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.